Hey, who's seen Altered Carbon? Oh, great job.
I did.
Yeah.
So
I've
I've
still
seen the
waiting
first.
to see.
Yes, I've seen the first episode,
Good.
and I want to keep seeing more. And Chris, like, I think it looks so interesting. Not like the best show I've ever seen interesting, but I've seen the first episode. I haven't seen any more. Please don't spoil anything for me, but I think it looks interesting so far.
Yeah, JD, as much as I know, the only two people which saw it from back to end, it's me and Ned.
And me.
And D. Okay.
Well, you can add me to the list. I literally watched the entire thing in one day. I was loving it so much. Like, I'm just gonna keep going. This is great.
That's a good sign.
Watch Olympics, honey. I'm like, yeah. Can I watch the last couple first, sweetie, before we watch the Olympics? She finally caved, so she got to watch the last two, and that was it.
I'm so excited. I'm gonna have to just watch it without Chris.
It really is very, very good.
Yeah, I would, because I was watching something with my husband, and he's been working away a lot. And now Netflix has taken it off. And if I'd have just stayed at home, well, I was staying at home. If I'd have just watched it without him, I wouldn't now be missing the last series.
Yeah, see, that's why sometimes you have to start series without your partner, because you don't want to get stuck in that fucking web.
Yeah, but there's a decent amount of sexiness in this. It is pretty good with a partner.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll make sense.
Well, there wasn't in the series we were watching.
Yeah, I think like in 5 and then another till the 8, there's a bit of okay, honey, let's take a break. That kind of stuff.
I love how Chris keeps trying to interject and no.
Wow.
I'm just going with the flow. I'm going with the flow.
Oh, love it.
Apparently, nobody wants to fucking hear my opinion.
Aggressive.
I just
They're not pretty.
I guess you could say it's actually very Deism friendly, the way that like the soul can be just moved around however you want. Like it's just the skin is just with the skin.
Oh, that is very Deism friendly.
Or I think idealism friendly, yeah.
What don't they call it, a sleeve or something?
Yeah, they refer to bodies as sleeves. You can now make bodies or use ones you've had. You could actually put your own body on ice and move around, and you come back to it like, hey, how you like being back in your old sleeve? And the way the way they talk about it, you're really just this little disc that goes in the back of your head and the back of your neck. So they're always like, hey, if you get hurt, make sure they don't shoot you there.
Right, like you can still be destroyed. The mind can still be destroyed because
unless
one thing.
Unless you're so filthy rich that you can actually upload yourself to a satellite and then come back into a different one, and then you can still be immortal.
Right, and then have it uploaded, backed up. And
I like that underlying idea that if that ever happened, that the rich would just take over someday. Like you'd have these super rich and immortal people who are just kind of shoving everyone else down.
Oh, someday, like it's not happening right now. You know, the 5% of the population has got 90% of the resources. Like someday, yeah, I get it.
Let's say the way the health industry works in America, there's a little bit of that. Not at the level that this show goes, but that is
give it time, sweetie. Give it time.
It's just ramped up.
You know, there was a time where I would think the idea of that we could actually store the human mind in something as being comical, but I mean, we're up to a terabyte and a micro SD card now.
Seriously?
Information density in something the size of my thumbnail is just staggering.
Some of us don't need a whole terabyte for uploading our minds.
Oh. See, I was told that what is it, like we're getting down to nanometers that are getting close to where you're just like an atom width for these damn things.
Yeah. Oh no, the width of an atom is becoming a concern in expensive electronics.
Yeah, what the hell are we gonna line up if it's not atoms?
Yeah.
Well, they're working on quantum computing, and then just to say, like our brains, there's a huge estimate on that. It's anywhere between. I'm just doing a quick Google search because I thought it was like 50, but they're saying anywhere between 10 and 100 terabytes to sustain human consciousness is what neuroscientists are estimating.
Right. So that's just to persist the consciousness. That's not even to power the consciousness.
So like full spectrum, they said anywhere from 1 terabyte to 2.5. Is it PETA bytes? PETA or PETA?
Petaflops or something to that effect. Yeah, I mean, there's the storage problem and there's the processing problem. And quantum computing solves the processing problem.
Which one's was it not Murphy's law? It's a different law. Everything keeps shrinking and getting faster, but there's a limit. Moore's law, that's it.
Yeah, every so many cycles, the number of transistors we can fit in the same amount of space double, something to that effect.
Yeah, they're bumping into some pretty big walls at this point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's not a processing problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have a computer next to me that's an i7-920, and the difference between this and my newest one is negligible. So they've already kind of run into that. Like, they're just kind of going for efficiency, but they're not really making things all that much faster.
A Moore's law cycle, at least when it was observed, was 2 years. Approximately every 2 years would double the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit, which is yikes.
Yeah, I swear computers they're like the so it was like closing on like sci-fi at this point.
Working just in software design, it's crazy. Just in the short time I've been working at it, how much things have changed. Whole design patterns have been conceived of and realized that make writing software an entirely different exercise than it was just 5 years ago.
Scott, you're talking about AI or actually transferring consciousness in a computer? Because those are two totally different things.
No. Which thing are you referring back to? Like what I'm just talking about now with design?
No. I was talking about, the start of your conversation and the end of your conversation. I think you made a switch. So I might in theory agree on AI, but we got to make some distinctions there. But the consciousness in a computer, I think there is a way more bigger problem than technical problems per se. So,
well, I'm saying that like even if we could model it correctly somehow, I'm saying the technology to even create that model, I don't believe is there. Of course, there are more problems than just those two. I'm just talking about the technological limitations, not the.
No, that's what I meant. I mean, I don't think it's a technological problem. The problem is in the model that we have no fucking idea how the model works.
That is a big problem.
It is a big problem. I mean, if you take there is a worm. It's called C. elegans. It has, I think, 320 neuron connections, and it has been replicated in a machine. Easy peasy. It's very easy, It has totally been replicated. But if you talk to neuroscientists, they say, listen, we have no fucking idea how these neurons interact. I mean, we can replicate that in a machine. It's so small. Still, it doesn't make any sense to us.
In some recent imaging techniques have been able to deduce that neurons are connecting on more dimensions, well outside the 3 or 4 dimensions that we're capable of perceiving. So, like, the connections are in ways that like we can't even process how they're connecting to each other.
I don't know if it's the problem of process because again, and I know you're not saying that, but I just want to be extremely clear. But when you say process, it seems to be people usually think that you're implying again a technological platform that we can't overcome, and it's going to be eventually a problem of time. What I think is that we don't have an exact, and a very good model to actually build something which interacts the way it is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No. I mean that we would need a good model to work with. I mean, obviously, we have things like neural networks that are good at mimicking.
Right. You're right. So that's why you understand. When they asked you at the beginning, if you were asking about, transferring the consciousness in a like an avatar or an AI. I mean, because those two very different
very different things.
Well, that's the thing. Is can you actually transfer, or would you simply be making a copy? In which case, I'm not sure if any of the outsiders could figure out that you're not really you and you're just the copy of the other person.
Oh, making a copy is the same problem.
I wonder if you're just like with transporters, like, oh yeah, we just reorganize, take your molecules and put them elsewhere. Yeah, but is that going to be me? Or is that just my new clone, which is made out of the same parts?
Yeah, I mean,
questions to the philosophers.
I don't know. Maybe we could discuss in like a technical way, like what is the brain made of? What makes the consciousness? And in that case, can moving it from one medium to another keep it intact or not?
Only if there were some way to enforce the uniqueness of it.
I mean, that's the thing they explore in Altered Carbon, where there are people who double themselves. Like, well, how does that work? Is that him too? How does that work?
Well, JD, explain in the side chat. Shanna had mentioned she was trying to bring up a point about deism, and she said, let's see, AI occurs, deism wins, discuss. And of course, she was kind of doing it tongue in cheek, but I'm sure she would love for the conversation to happen. You said if electrical impulses can account for the entirety of the mind, then deism loses. So if you're able to take, and you're trolling.
That's a little bit.
Yeah, which is totally fine. We that is acceptable and expected behavior.
To be the way deism kind of defined that there's really no way for it to lose.
But the way that you're talking, hold on, let me finish the thought. If you're talking about taking the mind and moving it from one electrical circuit generated medium to another, are you rooting for the idea that the mind is accountable just through electrical impulses?
Well, as we understand, it'd be electrical and chemical impulses. Like the brain is the mind. The brain is what produces.
So it's wetware instead of firmware or hardware,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That everything we explain in terms of like I did this, I thought that, are all in terms of the processes that the brain goes through. And
so are you saying that like substance dualism, like that's the term, is necessary for deism? That there has to be something substantial that is not
maybe
material and something that is immaterial. There must be both.
No, that's not. No.
Okay, I'm just asking because that seems like the only reason that deism would have a problem if you can break the brain down to wetware.
Oh no. But deism doesn't fail, right? Like JD said, that's retarded.
Yeah, honestly, that's one of the issues I have with it. That you can't really. There's no really way. The world could be, as far as I can tell, in anything. The universe existence could be anything, and deism could be true, or it could be false. There's really just that's kind of the way I look at it. Like it doesn't. There's no predictions to be made. There's no way to test it. So you're just kind of like, well, nice thought. It'd be kind of cool.
Oh, it's not a science experiment. What the hell are you, JD?
Exactly.
Please don't create this bullshit here.
Well, no, I agree. It's not a science experiment. But then again, the fact that I can't test it is a reason for me to suspect it.
Well, that's ridiculous because that's the reason to suspect the legitimacy of a science experiment, not a philosophical argument, right? That's a reason to maybe reserve judgment, but to be so critical and hyper, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Stupid? No, not stupid.
Skeptical?
I'm kidding. I'm a big fan here. Like that's skeptical. Yeah. That's weird. Like that's way too much. Like you wouldn't be that skeptical about normal everyday things. You wouldn't be that skeptical if your wife told you that she loved you. You're not that skeptical about everything else in life. So this one thing, and it not having any difference to reality to you doesn't change the truth.
I'm that skeptical with every girl that I date. Sorry, but that's more about my choices than.
I'm sure the feeling's mutual.
Well, let me phrase it.
As have sex. Forget the feeling.
I think of it in terms of people presenting propositions about the world to me and how I judge them. So when someone puts forth a proposition in such a way that there is no way to determine whether it's true or false, the very act of coming up with a proposition like that is, to me, reason to suspect it, to make it's now less likely that it's the case than more likely.
Right, but that's just because of your criteria. And I submit that your criteria is skewed. But who cares, right? I mean, like, do what you do. But that's if we were to have a serious conversation about it, that's where I would stand there. Like, just because that's your criteria, that doesn't mean that that's that's the correct criteria to hold, or necessarily the best criteria to hold for that one particular thing. It might be good when it comes to, will that car blow up? Let's put X, Y, and Z in it and do some experiments. But it's not so practical with. I think it's the wrong tool. That's what I would say.
Someone creamed my car to want to look both ways.
Yeah. Would you say that what I said there is a good general principle? That if someone presents a proposition that in such a way that there's no way to test it, that's a reason to be skeptical of the proposition?
No, not in general. I think that it's too situational. I think that's too blanket, I guess is my critique of it.
It would really have to depend on the claim being assessed.
I'm trying to think of any. Well, let's think of one where you shouldn't be skeptical. Let's think of some proposition that is there's just no way to determine whether it's true or false that you should still believe is probably true anyway.
That's not how this works. Somebody presents something with no evidence. There's no way to test it, so you should believe it's true. That's such an unfair representation of my position. You know that. Be nice. Jake.
Well, then, I'm thinking in terms of how likely should I think is the true, whether it's 50-50 or a little one way or a little the other. In those terms, that's how I'm thinking of it at this moment.
Okay, so like if I were to come to you with
should I be 50-50 on deism, so to speak, or should I be one way or the other?
What?
When it comes to like the idea that deism, that there is something that made the universe, should I be 50-50 on that? Should I be a little towards it might be true, a little towards it's probably false? Like which way should I go? And to me, if the proposition is untestable, I should lean towards probably false.
Right. Again, that's because your criteria is what it is, and it makes sense under your criteria. And I'll stand by what I said. I think that your criteria is not the accurate criteria to be using for the claim.
Well, that's where what's wrong with my criteria. I'm willing to change it if it's crap.
Because if you're talking about philosophical arguments, whether or not they can be tested and experimented is not the criteria to be using. Are they using logic that makes sense? Are they using arguments that make sense and that work, that line up with reality? Are explanations being given? Are things that can't be explained also being accounted for? Like, these are the different kinds of things that we use in philosophical conversations to decide whether or not something should be taken seriously or if any weight should be given to it. Right? Like, there are brilliant, brilliant minds having these conversations, and not one of those brilliant, brilliant minds in this philosophical conversation, like way brilliant, more brilliant than all of us put together, right? And not one of them are saying, well, I can't test it, so like, that's not a thing. That's if we're doing science experiments. That's if a creationist is like, evolution's false, yo. Like, that's when those kind of tools come into play. Does that make sense?
To be honest, for me at the moment, no.
Okay.
I'm not quite. Maybe if we talk more, I'll start to get it.
It reminds me a lot of one of the courses I took in college, where it was one of one of my electives, and we had to read the books, and essentially the professor, a few people presented their take on the story that we had read and what they thought was going on. And one guy was like, I don't understand why my take on it is not correct compared to everyone else's. It still takes into account this. And it's about how well does it account for what's already in the text when you're extrapolating. And I think that I follow their Shannos, where you have to, there is obviously the edge points of what we can know about. So you try to find the things that match up to the edge points as well as they can. And there's just that portion that you can't rigorously verify. But if everything leading up to it lines up, there's good reason to accept it.
Yeah, okay.
So, who won?
Wow,
I lost.
Scott ends the conversation, man.
I lost you guys 20 minutes ago. Who won?
Shanna won. What?
Oh, yeah, that was a very stupid question.
I'm on.
Of course, Shanna won.
I think that, especially being a deist in a community where a lot of atheists are arguing with a lot of Christians, and I don't mean this like as a insult towards atheists or Christians or whatever, but it's just, they're dumb. They're just stupid, right? They got stupid ass arguments, stupid ass objections. It doesn't make any fucking sense. They've clearly read like a chapter. By chapter, I mean couple paragraphs of a wiki page, or they heard somebody say something, or they saw a clever meme or a bumper sticker. Like, this shit's just not well thought out. They're not good objections. So my knee jerk sometimes is to be like, that's stupid.
In both directions, Christian arguments against atheism.
Oh yeah. I completely agree. I mean, don't even get me started, JD. I don't even give Christianity the time of fucking day. I'll listen to atheists. I'll listen to atheist arguments for atheism. I'll listen to atheistic objections to deism. But I don't even you don't see me debating or discussing Christians, because I don't think there's anything to fucking talk about.